In this video, I'm going to be giving a brief tutorial on how to silence your aquarium sponge filters. So this might be a problem for some of you. I know it was for me. When I first set up this fish rack, I had 18 sponge filters running on these 9 tanks. And they were so loud that I could actually hear them from the floor above this one. This is all set up in the basement. I could hear them from the floor above this one when they were all running. I could hear the little bubbling noises from that far away, and it was just extremely irritating. So I went and I figured out how to get these things to be quieter and basically silent. Now, this isn't my original idea by any means. A lot of people have done videos on this. I kind of just wanted to provide my own take on it and show how I do this. So bear with me here. I'm going to show you everything that you need to silence your sponge filter. And these sponge filters you're seeing here are all pre-silenced, so none of these are unmodified. But the unmodified ones, when you get them out of the box, the bubbles that come out of them will be much larger than this, and that's primarily where the noise comes from. The larger bubbles make a very loud popping noise when they hit the surface, so what we need to do is modify it to create smaller bubbles. So what you're going to start with are these tools right here. You're going to start with some scissors. Next up is some type of strong cutter. I like to use an Anvil cutter, and really if you have a good cutter, you probably don't even really need the scissors. Next up, a pair of needle nose pliers, some clear airline tubing, or you could use black airline tubing if you wanted. A small air stone about this size. I'll put a link to this exact one I'm using in the video description, but not too big. And then you're going to go with your unmodified sponge filter. This is a brand new one out of the box. This is an AQUANEAT one, I believe, rated for 60 gallons. I run 2 of these in each of my 20-gallon longs because they are my primary filtration in my tanks besides the automatic water change system. So you're going to take the top clear tube off the top, and then you're going to take this small piece of plastic off the top. From there, you should be able to pull the actual sponge piece off and see the internal working of the sponge filter. And you're going to take this apart now. The bottom of these is weighted, so you can take that weighted part off. That just comes right off. All this is snap on, snap off. You're not really going to break it. And you're left with this internal piece right here. This is what we need to modify, but first we're going to split it in half. It easily splits into 2 halves right here. And through the center of this is a small plastic tube. The air runs through that small plastic tube to the very bottom of the sponge filter, and then the large air bubbles then go up through the center again, pulling water through the sponge as they pull air through that top tube. But we want to get rid of this center column. So you can see that center column is attached by 5 or 6 little connectors. You're going to just take your needle nose plier on each one of those little connectors and just twist until you hear it snap. It's thin plastic, so it shouldn't take you too much effort. And like I said, those little connectors are the only thing that hold that column in place, and they're only at the bottom end here. There's not connectors at the top end, so once you snap out those 5 or 6, the connector should come free. And you might want to just kind of clean it up a little in case any of the connectors still have a little remnants there. But that was a pretty clean break on all of them. You can see there's nothing in the center now, and this piece came right out. Now we're going to hold on to this. We're going to save this one right here. We're going to put that off to the side because we're going to need that in a second. But you're going to do the same exact thing to this one now. You can see there are exactly 6 little connectors there. We're just going to snap each one of those, just a quick little twist, and you'll hear it snap, and that'll free up the column on this one as well. And this is something that shouldn't require too much strength. You just want to hold the entire piece as steady as you can while you do that twisting motion. And, you know, if you go too crazy with it, you might kind of crack the outer housing. But I've never done it, and I did all, 20 or so of the sponge filters I have. And I've never broken one of these little housings. But I do have a little cleanup to do here. Let me show you. One piece did kind of stay in there. The whole column came out of the middle, but one little piece is still in there. So I'm just going to kind of twist it a little bit more so I can get that last remnants out of there. It's not the end of the world if it stays, but I kind of just like to have it perfectly clean. So you can see that's all hollow in the middle now. I can reattach these 2 pieces. There's nothing in the center. Completely hollow. Now we're going to revisit that little plastic piece that we took out in a second, but I can reattach this now. And with that little extra plastic piece, we're going to use the narrower side. Both these pieces are the same, so I'm just going to pick one or the other. We're going to start on the narrower side, and then we're going to go up maybe 3/4 of an inch to an inch, and we're just going to cut it. And I like the Anvil cutter because it doesn't pinch it. If you try to cut it with your scissors, you're going to end up pinching the end of it, and then you have to kind of reopen it. but this cuts it perfectly. And I'm going to zoom in right here so you can see the end of it didn't get pinched at all. It's still a perfect cylinder. And you'll see why that'll be important in just 1 second here, but this little piece now should be just slightly narrower on the end that we didn't cut. The end that we didn't cut is going to go into the bottom of this piece right here. This was what was on the top of the sponge filter. That gets inserted right in the bottom there, and then on the half that we did cut, we're just going to take some of the airline tubing, and I'm just kind of forcing that in there so that it's in there nice and good. But on the end that we did cut, we're going to take a little bit of the airline tubing and we're going to get it over that cut end. And that's why it's important that that end of that little piece of plastic didn't get pinched, because then it reduces the airflow that's going through. So I like to cut the airline tubing, around the length of this this little air stone here. Again, only an inch or two. It's not an exact science. You're just trying to measure it out so that the way this all sits, the air stone will kind of be towards the bottom of that housing that we just modified. So I'm going to put the air stone on that little piece that I just cut. And then on the other end of the airline tubing, I'm going to force that over the end of the little plastic piece here that we just cut. And once that's on there, it'll just kind of hang there, and that is pretty much the last step besides putting it back together. Now you can see the airline's going to go into the top of here. It's going to feed air through the bottom half and into the air stone, and it's now going to create smaller air bubbles, whereas the way this thing was working before, it was just shooting air out of the end of those little cylinders that we cut off, and the bubbles it was producing were much larger, and when those bubbles reached the surface, they made a louder popping noise. So you can see how that kind of sits in there, and the sponge will go back over the top of this. But I'm going to put the sponge on first here, and then I'm going to attach that little piece that we just made. And that should just snap into place nice and easy. And that's pretty much it. Now you're going to drop this in your tank. You're going to put the clear tube that was on the top of here, you're going to put that over your airline first. Then you're going to attach your airline. Then you're going to fasten that tube into place. And what you'll find is that your sponge filter will now be quieter and almost silent. So I now have that modified sponge filter in the tank, and I'm going to let you guys listen in on what it sounds like. So as you can see, when I have the lid closed and I'm even 6 inches to a foot away, you can hear virtually nothing. When I open the lid, you can hear a very faint bubbling noise, but besides that, there's no sound. When I sit next to these and have all 18 of them running, I hear next to nothing. Huge difference from when I didn't have these modified. Day and night, I could hear these things bubbling from upstairs, multiple rooms away. Now I can't even hear them when I'm sitting right on top of them. Definitely worth doing to your sponge filters. Not every brand of sponge filter is going to be exactly the same, and not every size of sponge filter is going to be exactly the same, but a lot of them are like this on the inside, so I figured I would use this one as the base and kind of show you guys how I did it on this one. And one last thing to mention is sometimes on rare occasions I've had one of the little air stones inside of these sponge filters get all clogged up. It's just as simple as pulling out the sponge filter and replacing the air stone, but it's barely happened. I mean, I'm running 18 of these and I've maybe had to replace 3 of the little air stones. Not the end of the world, especially with how cheap air stones are. But with all that being said, if you found this interesting in any way at all, hit that like button down below. And if you're new to my channel, hit the subscribe button for lots of awesome aquarium and pleco videos just like this. And as always, thank you for watching.